The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the streets of Seoul into rivers of reflected light. Yoon Ha-Rin stood by the window of her small apartment in Mapo, watching the city blur into watercolor through the glass. The sky was the color of old photographs, gray and faded, and the distant mountains were barely visible through the mist. It was the kind of rain that made everything feel distant, like the world was wrapped in cotton, muffled and soft. She held a cup of tea that had long gone cold, her fingers wrapped around the ceramic for warmth she no longer felt. At 29 years old, Ha-Rin had built a life that looked peaceful from the outside. She taught literature at a small private school in Hongdae, lived in a cozy apartment filled with books and plants, spent her weekends at quiet cafes writing in journals that no one would ever read. Her students loved her because she taught them that words had power, that stories could heal, that literature was not just about analyzing dead authors, but about understanding the human heart. She had friends, a stable job, a routine that brought her comfort. But there was a hollow space inside her chest, a room that had been locked for 5 years, and sometimes late at night when she couldn't sleep, she would press her hand against her ribs and wonder if it would ever stop aching. She didn't talk about Jin-Ho anymore. Her friends had stopped asking years ago, understanding that some wounds were too deep to prod at casually. Even Min Young, her closest friend and colleague, knew better than to mention his name unless Ha-Rin brought it up first, which she rarely did. It was easier to pretend he had been a dream, a beautiful story she had read once and half remembered. But the truth was that Jin-Ho lived in everything she did. In the books she chose to teach, always the ones about longing and loss. In the way she still took her coffee black with just a touch of honey, the way he had taught her. In the letters she wrote but never sent, filling notebook after notebook with words meant for someone who was no longer there to read them. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the distant sound of traffic. Ha-Rin had always loved the rain. Jin-Ho had hated it. He was a photographer, a man who chased light, who lived for golden hours and clear skies. Rain meant canceled shoots, missed opportunities, days spent indoors feeling restless. They had been so different in that way, in so many ways. She was the one who found beauty in gray days and melancholy, who could spend hours reading the same poem over and over, finding new meaning each time. He was motion and energy, always planning the next trip, the next project, the next adventure. They had balanced each other once, or maybe they had just collided, two incompatible forces that created something beautiful and brief before inevitably breaking apart. Her phone buzzed on the windowsill, pulling her from her thoughts. A message from Min Young asking if she wanted to grab dinner. Ha-Rin typed back a polite decline, saying she had papers to grade, which was partially true. There was always work to do, always a legitimate excuse to stay home alone. Min Young would understand. She always did. Min Young was the kind of friend who knew when to push and when to let go, who brought over wine without being asked and never demanded explanations for the sadness that sometimes clouded Ha-Rin's eyes. Ha-Rin set down her phone and turned back to the window. Somewhere out there in the rain-soaked city, life was continuing. People were falling in love, breaking up, making choices that would change everything, living through their own private dramas. And she was here, suspended in amber, caught between a past she couldn't change and a future she couldn't quite imagine. It had been 5 years since Jin-Ho left Seoul. 5 years since he had stood in this very apartment, in this very spot by the window, and told her he was taking a job abroad. 5 years since she had told him to go, that she wouldn't ask him to stay, that they both knew this relationship had run its course. She had been so proud, so dignified, keeping her voice steady even as her heart shattered, and he had believed her. He had actually believed that she wanted him to leave. That was the thing about pride. It protected you, but it also imprisoned you. It kept you from saying the words that mattered, from admitting that you were wrong, from begging someone to stay even when they seemed determined to go. Ha-Rin had spent 5 years telling herself she had done the right thing, that loving someone meant letting them chase their dreams, that she had been mature and selfless. But late at night, in the honest darkness, she knew the truth. She had been afraid. Afraid that if she asked him to stay and he chose to leave anyway, it would hurt even more. Afraid that her love wasn't enough to compete with the world he wanted to explore. So she had made the choice for both of them, had released him before he could fully leave, had pretended it was what she wanted when really it was just the only way she knew how to survive. The rain continued to fall, drumming against the window like 1,000 tiny fingers tapping out a message she couldn't quite decode. Ha-Rin closed her eyes and let herself remember, just for a moment, just for tonight. She remembered the way Jin-Ho used to wake up before dawn to catch the sunrise, how he would kiss her forehead and whisper that he was going out to shoot, that she should keep sleeping. She remembered the smell of his camera bag, a mixture of leather and the faint chemical scent of film. She remembered how he looked at the world, always framing things, his hands forming a rectangle as he composed shots in his mind even without a camera. She remembered the sound of his laugh, bright and unexpected, the way his whole face transformed when he was truly happy. She remembered everything, and it hurt, but it was also precious. These memories were all she had left of him. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know as she stood there in her apartment with her cold tea and her aching heart, was that at that exact moment, in a hotel room across the city, Jin-Ho was sitting on the edge of a bed with a letter in his hands. A letter he had written 5 years ago. A letter he had carried across continents, through dozens of countries in the bottom of his camera bag like a talisman or a curse. A letter he had never been brave enough to send. Jin-Ho had returned to Seoul 3 days ago. He told himself it was for work, a photography exhibition that would showcase his best work from the past 5 years of traveling. His agent had been thrilled. Seoul was his hometown, the place where he had built his initial reputation before going international. A homecoming exhibition would be a huge success, bringing together his old fans and introducing him to a new generation. The gallery in Gangnam was already fully booked for the opening night. Everything was perfect, professionally speaking. But Jin-Ho knew the truth. He had come back for her. He had always been coming back for her. The letter was old now, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges, the ink faded in places where his fingers had touched it too many times over the years. He had written it the night before he left Seoul, sitting in a hotel room not unlike this one, trying to find the words to explain what he felt. He had written draft after draft, crumpling up papers and starting again, until finally at 3 a.m, he had produced something that felt true. It wasn't perfect. It was raw and honest and probably too vulnerable, too revealing. But it said what he needed to say. That he loved her. That leaving her was the hardest thing he had ever done. That he understood why she had let him go so easily. That her pride had always been one of the things he admired about her. But that he wished, desperately, that she had asked him to stay. That he would have stayed. That the job, the opportunity, the whole world meant nothing compared to the possibility of a life with her. He had addressed the envelope, stamped it, carried it with him to the airport, but he hadn't mailed it. At the last moment, standing in front of a postbox in Incheon International Airport, he had chickened out. What if she read it and felt nothing? What if it just made things harder for both of them? What if she had already moved on, was already happy, didn't need the complication of his feelings disrupting her life? So he had tucked the letter back into his bag, telling himself he would send it later, when the timing was right, when he was braver. But later had never come. Years passed. He traveled to Japan, Thailand, India, Morocco, Iceland, Peru. He took photographs that won awards, that were published in prestigious magazines, that hung in galleries around the world. He dated other women, had relationships that lasted months, sometimes almost a year. But nothing stuck. No one felt right. Because he was comparing everyone to a literature teacher in Seoul who probably didn't think about him anymore, who now here he was, back in the city where it all began and ended, holding a letter he should have sent 5 years ago. The hotel room was nice, minimalist, and modern in that way Seoul hotels had perfected, all clean lines and neutral colors. His camera equipment was scattered across the desk, lenses and batteries and memory cards in organized chaos. Outside the window, rain fell on the glittering city, on the Han River winding through like a dark ribbon, on the mountains standing watch in the distance. Somewhere in this vast city, Ha-Rin was living her life. Did she still teach at that school in Hongdae? Did she still live in that apartment in Mapo with the window that overlooked the alley where cats would gather at sunset? Did she still write in those journals, filling pages with thoughts she would never speak aloud? Did she ever think of him? Jin-Ho stood and walked to the window, the letter still in his hand. He had 3 weeks in Seoul before the exhibition. 3 weeks to decide if he was brave enough to find her, to finally deliver this letter, to risk everything for a chance that was probably already lost. 3 weeks to figure out if some goodbyes could be undone, or if the past was meant to stay buried. What neither of them knew yet was that fate, or chance, or whatever force guides the universe, had already made the decision for them. Because tomorrow morning, through a series of coincidences that would seem impossible if they weren't true, that letter would find its way to Ha-Rin. Not mailed, not hand-delivered by Jin-Ho himself, but appearing mysteriously on her desk at school, unopened yet somehow exactly where it needed to be. And when she opened it, when she read those words he had written 5 years ago, everything would change. All the carefully constructed walls, all the practiced indifference, all the years of pretending she was fine would come crashing down. Because some words once written, once read, cannot be unwritten or unread. They exist forever, changing everything they touch. But for now, on this rainy night in Seoul, they were both still alone. Ha-Rin by her window in Mapo, Jin-Ho in his hotel room in Gangnam. 2 people separated by miles and years and pride and fear, neither knowing that the distance between them was about to collapse, neither knowing that the story they thought had ended 5 years ago was actually just beginning. The next morning arrived gray and damp, the rain having finally stopped but leaving everything glistening and wet. Ha-Rin woke up early, as she always did, her internal clock set to catch the quiet hours before the city fully woke. She went through her morning routine mechanically, the same movements she had performed thousands of times. Shower, coffee, toast with jam, choosing clothes that were professional but comfortable, gathering her teaching materials. She looked at herself in the mirror as she brushed her hair, seeing the same face she saw every day. Maybe there were a few more lines around her eyes now, subtle marks of time passing. Maybe her expression was a bit more guarded than it had been 5 years ago. But she was still her. Still recognizably Yoon Ha-Rin, still moving through life one careful day at a time. The subway was crowded, as it always was during the morning commute. Bodies pressed together in that peculiar soul intimacy of strangers sharing space. Ha-Rin held onto a pole and let her mind drift, thinking about the lesson she would teach today. They were studying poetry, specifically poems about memory and loss. She had chosen the curriculum herself, always drawn to themes that resonated with something deep inside her. Her students, mostly teenagers trying to navigate their own complicated feelings, responded well to her teaching style. She never talked down to them, never dismissed their emotions as trivial or adolescent. She understood that heartbreak at 16 felt just as real as heartbreak at 29, that pain didn't require a minimum age or experience level to be valid. The school was a modest building tucked between taller structures in Hongdae, the neighborhood known for its universities and art scene and youthful energy. Ha-Rin had taught here for 7 years, starting when she was just 22 and fresh out of graduate school. She loved the location, loved walking through streets covered in murals and street art, loved the cafes and bookstores and the general creative atmosphere. Jin-Ho had loved it too. He had taken some of his best photographs in this neighborhood, capturing the collision of traditional and modern, the way old women in Hanbok walked past teenagers in punk fashion, the way ancient temples stood surrounded by contemporary art galleries. Ha-Rin shook her head, physically trying to dislodge the thought. She had been thinking about Jin-Ho too much lately, even before last night's melancholy window-watching session. Maybe it was the rain, which always made her nostalgic. Maybe it was the fact that she had recently turned 29, an age that felt significant somehow, a year before 30, a marker of time passing irretrievably. Or maybe there was no reason at all. Maybe grief worked that way, lying dormant for months and then surging up unexpectedly, refusing to be ignored. She entered the school through the teacher's entrance, greeting the security guard with a small bow. The hallways were still quiet, classes not starting for another hour. She preferred to arrive early, to have time to prepare, to sit in the silence of her empty classroom and gather her thoughts. Her classroom was on the 3rd floor, a decent-sized room with windows overlooking a small courtyard where students would eat lunch on nice days. She had decorated it over the years with posters of famous authors, with quotes about the power of storytelling, with student artwork and essays that had particularly moved her. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, she immediately noticed something different. On her desk, which she had left clean and organized yesterday afternoon, there was an envelope. Just sitting there, stark white against the dark wood of the desk, somehow luminous in the morning light filtering through the windows. Ha-Rin froze, a strange feeling crawling up her spine. Who had been in her classroom? How had they gotten in? The door had been locked. She approached the desk slowly, as if the envelope might be dangerous, might explode if she moved too quickly. It was a simple envelope, the kind you could buy at any stationery store. No return address. But on the front, in handwriting that made her heart stop, was her name. Just her name. Yoon Ha-Rin. Written in the careful characters she would recognize anywhere, in any context, after any amount of time. Jin-Ho's handwriting. Distinctive and messy, letters that slanted to the right, the kind of handwriting that looked like it had been done in a hurry but with great care. She knew that handwriting like she knew her own heartbeat. She had seen it on notes left on her refrigerator, on birthday cards, on the backs of photographs he had given her. She had memorized it without trying, the way you memorize the face of someone you love. For a long moment, Ha-Rin couldn't move. She just stared at the envelope, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. It wasn't possible. Jin-Ho was in Europe or South America, or wherever his travels had taken him. He had no reason to be in Seoul, no reason to be in her school, no reason to leave a letter on her desk. It had to be a mistake, a coincidence, someone else with similar handwriting. But even as she tried to rationalize it, she knew she was lying to herself. That was his writing. She would stake her life on it. With shaking hands, she picked up the envelope. It was light, probably only a single page or two inside. The paper felt old somehow, not fresh and crisp, but slightly worn, like it had been carried around for a while. She turned it over. The seal on the back was intact, but aged, the glue yellowed. This letter had been sealed a long time ago, years ago, if she had to guess. But how had it gotten here? How was this possible? She should wait, she thought. She should sit down, prepare herself emotionally, maybe text Min Young to come over after school so she wouldn't be alone when she read whatever was inside. But her fingers were already sliding under the seal, carefully opening the envelope without tearing it, pulling out the folded papers inside. 2 sheets, filled with writing on both sides. She recognized the date at the top of the first page. 5 years ago, the day before Jin-Ho left Seoul. Ha-Rin's vision blurred with sudden tears. She sat down heavily in her desk chair, the letter trembling in her hands. And then, with her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, she began to read. The letter started simply, Ha-Rin. Just her name, but she could hear his voice saying it, could imagine the way he would have paused after writing it, gathering courage to continue. I'm writing this in a hotel room 12 hours before my flight leaves. I've tried to sleep, but I can't. I keep thinking about you, about us, about everything I should have said over the past few weeks, but didn't. I'm not good with words like you are. You're the writer, the teacher, the one who understands how language works. I just take pictures. But right now, a picture isn't enough. I need words, even if they're clumsy, even if they're inadequate. Ha-Rin's tears were falling freely now, dripping onto the paper. She tried to blink them away, but they kept coming. She kept reading, her eyes racing across the lines, drinking in every word. I know you think I want to leave, that this job, this opportunity, is more important to me than you. But that's not true. I want you to know that even if nothing else I say in this letter matters, I need you to know that you are more important to me than any job, any adventure, any success. You are the most important thing in my life. You always have been. The handwriting got messier as the letter went on, as if he had been writing faster, more urgently. When you told me you understood, that you wouldn't ask me to stay, that we both knew this relationship had run its course, I wanted to disagree. I wanted to tell you that you were wrong, that what we had wasn't running its course, that it was just beginning. But you seemed so sure, so calm, so ready to let me go. And I thought, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm holding on to something that already ended for you. Maybe your heart has already moved on even if mine hasn't." Ha-Rin made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. How could he have thought that? How could he have believed she didn't love him anymore when every fiber of her being had been screaming for him to stay? The letter continued. "But I need to tell you the truth, even if it's too late. I love you, Ha-Rin. I have loved you since the day we met at that coffee shop in Hongdae, when you spilled your drink all over your books and I helped you clean up, and you laughed instead of crying, and I thought, this is the woman I want to spend my life with. I love the way you see beauty in sad things, the way you can spend hours talking about a single poem, the way you care about your students like they're your own children. I love your quiet strength, your kindness, your intelligence. I love everything about you, even the things that drive me crazy, like how you always leave lights on in rooms you're not in, or how you collect books faster than you can read them." She was fully crying now, her body shaking with sobs she had been holding back for 5 years. All this time, she had thought he left without looking back, that he had chosen his career over her easily, that she had been a pleasant but ultimately forgettable chapter in his life. But he had loved her. He had loved her, and she had been too proud, too afraid, too stupid to tell him the truth. "I'm writing this letter because I'm a coward," the letter said. "I can't say these things to your face. I've tried, a dozen times over the past few weeks, but the words stick in my throat. So I'm writing them down, hoping that putting them on paper will make them real, will make them true in a way that spoken words never seem to be. I'm going to mail this letter tomorrow, from the airport. By the time you read it, I'll be gone. Maybe that's cowardly too. Maybe I should stay and have this conversation face to face, but I think maybe it will be easier for both of us this way. You can read it alone, process it without me watching you, decide what you want to do without pressure." The letter was reaching its end. Ha-Rin could see there were only a few more lines on the second page. She didn't want it to end. She wanted to stay in this moment forever, suspended in the knowledge that he had loved her, that she wasn't alone in her grief, that the past 5 years of aching had been shared. "I don't know what will happen next," Jin-Ho had written. "Maybe you'll read this and feel nothing. Maybe too much time will have passed. Maybe you've already met someone new, someone who deserves you more than I do. But I had to tell you. I had to try. Because living with regret is worse than risking rejection. Because some things need to be said, even if they're said too late. Because you deserve to know that you were loved, are loved, will always be loved by someone who was too stupid and scared to fight for you when it mattered." The letter ended with a simple closing. "Yours, always and forever, Jin-Ho." And then, a postscript, added in smaller writing at the bottom. "P.S. If you want to respond, I'll be checking my email obsessively for the next few months. But if you don't want to respond, I'll understand. Either way, thank you for the time we had. It was the best part of my life." Ha-Rin sat there in her empty classroom, holding a 5-year-old letter, her face wet with tears, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. All this time, all this wasted time. They had loved each other and been too afraid to say it, too proud to fight for it, too convinced that the other person didn't care enough. It was almost funny, in a tragic way. Almost like one of the literary ironies she taught her students about. Communication, she always told them, was the foundation of all relationships. Misunderstanding was the root of most tragedies. And here she was, living proof of her own lessons. But there was still one question that made no sense. The letter had never been mailed. He had written it 5 years ago, but it had never reached her. She had never gotten an email, never received a letter in her mailbox at home. For 5 years, she had heard nothing from Jin-Ho. Total silence. And then today, this letter appears mysteriously on her desk, still sealed, looking like it had never been sent. How was that possible? Before she could try to figure it out, there was a knock on the classroom door. Ha-Rin jumped, quickly wiping her face with her sleeve, trying to compose herself. She shoved the letter into her bag and stood up, smoothing her hair, taking a deep breath. "Come in," she called, her voice only slightly shaky. The door opened and Min Young walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her friend took one look at Ha-Rin's face and stopped dead. "What happened?" she asked, her voice immediately concerned. "Are you okay?" You look like you've seen a ghost." Ha-Rin laughed, a broken sound. "I think maybe I have," she said. And then, because she couldn't hold it in anymore, because she needed to tell someone or she would burst, she pulled the letter out of her bag. "Min-young, I need to show you something. But first, I need you to promise me I'm not crazy." Min-young set down the coffees and came over, her expression worried. "You're scaring me. What is it?" Ha-Rin handed her the letter. "Just read it, then tell me if any of this makes sense to you." As Min-young read, her eyes growing wider with each line, Ha-Rin walked back to the window and looked out at the courtyard. The rain from yesterday had left everything green and fresh, the trees almost glowing in the morning light. Students were starting to arrive, their voices drifting up from the ground floor, young and full of energy. Life was continuing around her, oblivious to the fact that her world had just tilted on its axis. "Ha-Rin," Min-young said finally, her voice strange. "Where did you get this?" "It was on my desk when I came in this morning. Just sitting there. I don't know how it got there. I don't know why it's here now, 5 years after it was written. I don't understand any of this." Min-young was quiet for a long moment, reading the letter again. Then she said slowly, "Ha-Rin, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not be angry with me." Something in her tone made Ha-Rin turn around. "What do you mean?" Min-young was holding the letter carefully like it might dissolve. "Last night, after you said you didn't want to get dinner, I was worried about you. You've seemed sad lately, more than usual. So I decided to stop by your apartment, just to check on you. But when I got to your building, I saw someone leaving. A man. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him at first. He was getting into a taxi, and just before he closed the door, I saw his face clearly." She paused. "It was Jin-Ho, Ha-Rin. Jin-Ho is in Seoul." The room seemed to tilt. Ha-Rin grabbed the edge of her desk for support. "What? That's not possible. He's not in Seoul. He's traveling. He's been traveling for years." "I'm not wrong," Min-young said firmly. "It was definitely him. I even called out, but he didn't hear me, or maybe he didn't want to stop. The taxi drove away before I could reach him. I was going to tell you today. I was trying to figure out how, and then you show me this letter." She looked down at the paper again. "I think he came back. I think he came back and he wanted to give you this letter, but he couldn't bring himself to do it directly. So he found another way." Ha-Rin's mind was racing. Jin-Ho was here. In Seoul. After 5 years of silence, he had come back. And he had somehow delivered this letter, this confession, this proof that she hadn't been alone in her heartbreak. But why now? Why after all this time? And if he went to the trouble of getting into her locked school, into her locked classroom, why didn't he just talk to her in person? Why leave the letter and disappear again? "There's something else," Min-young said hesitantly. "I did some research this morning after I saw him, just some quick internet searches. He has a photography exhibition opening in 2 weeks, at a gallery in Gangnam. It's his homecoming show, apparently. He's been traveling for the past 5 years, taking pictures all over the world, and now he's back to showcase his work." She pulled out her phone and showed Ha-Rin the gallery's website. There was Jin-Ho's face, older but unmistakable, next to information about the exhibition. The opening night was scheduled for Friday, 2 weeks away. Ha-Rin stared at the screen, at Jin-Ho's face looking back at her. He looked good, she thought distantly. Older, more weathered, lines around his eyes that suggested he had spent a lot of time squinting into sunlight. But still him, still the man she had loved, still the man she had never stopped loving, even when she tried to convince herself she had. "What are you going to do?" Min-young asked gently. That was the question, wasn't it? What was she going to do? She had 2 weeks before his exhibition opening. 2 weeks to decide if she was brave enough to see him again, to tell him that she had received his letter, that she felt the same way, that she had always felt the same way. 2 weeks to decide if 5 years of distance could be bridged, or if some things were too broken to fix. But even as she thought it, she knew the answer. Of course she would see him. Of course she would find him and tell him everything she should have said 5 years ago. Because Min-young was right about what she had written in the letter. Neither of them had been brave 5 years ago. They had both chosen safety over risk, pride over vulnerability. But maybe, just maybe, they could be brave now. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. The school day passed in a blur. Ha-Rin taught her classes on autopilot, her mind elsewhere even as she discussed poetry and themes and literary devices. Her students probably noticed that she was distracted, but they were kind enough not to comment. Or maybe they were just relieved to have an easy day. She gave them independent reading time and sat at her desk, the letter burning a hole in her bag, Jin-Ho's face from the website imprinted on her mind. When the final bell rang and the students streamed out, Ha-Rin stayed behind. She pulled out the letter again and read it for the third time that day, finding new meaning in every sentence, new evidence of the love they had shared and lost. And then she pulled out a notebook, the kind she used for her own personal writing, the letters she never sent. And she began to write. She wrote to Jin-Ho, even though she didn't know if she would ever show him the words. She wrote about the past 5 years, about how she had pretended to move on but had really just been treading water. She wrote about the loneliness, the regret, the what-ifs that had haunted her. She wrote about how she had convinced herself that letting him go had been the right thing, the mature thing, when really it had just been the cowardly thing. She wrote about how many times she had almost tried to find him online, to reach out, but had stopped herself because she was afraid of seeming desperate or pathetic. And she wrote about love, about how it had terrified her, that depth of feeling, the vulnerability it required, about how she had never loved anyone the way she loved him, before or since, about how she had built her life around the hole he had left, arranging everything carefully so she wouldn't have to feel the full weight of his absence, about how she had become someone who taught others about the power of words and stories, but couldn't find the words to express her own story, couldn't be brave enough to write her own ending. The words poured out of her, filling page after page. It was cathartic in a way she hadn't expected, like lancing a wound that had been festering for years. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the light outside the window turned golden with approaching sunset, until Min Young knocked on the door to check on her. "Still here?" Min Young asked, poking her head in. "I thought you'd have left hours ago." Ha-Rin looked up, surprised to see how much time had passed. "I was writing," she said, gesturing to the notebook. Min Young came in and sat on one of the student desks. "Are you okay? I've been worried about you all day." "I don't know," Ha-Rin admitted. "I feel like I'm in shock. Like any moment I'm going to wake up and realize this was all a dream. Jin-Ho can't really be back in Seoul. That letter can't really exist. It's too much like something out of a story." "But it is real," Min Young said gently. "He's here. He wrote that letter. And you have a choice to make. Are you going to let another 5 years pass, or are you going to be brave?" Ha-Rin closed the notebook. "When did you become so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just haven't been listening." Min Young smiled. "But seriously, Ha-Rin, I've watched you carry this pain for 5 years. I've seen you try to move on, date other people, convince yourself you're happy. But I've also seen the way you look when you think no one's watching. The way you get this distant, sad expression. The way you still take your coffee the way he taught you. The way you keep his favorite book on your shelf even though you've never read it." Ha-Rin felt her eyes fill with tears again. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be vulnerable. What if I tell him everything and he's moved on? What if the letter was just closure for him, a way to tie up loose ends before he leaves Seoul again? What if it wasn't?" Min Young countered. "What if he's just as scared as you are? What if he's been waiting for 5 years for some sign that you felt the same way? You'll never know unless you try." She was right, of course. Ha-Rin had spent 5 years playing it safe, and all it had gotten her was loneliness and regret. Maybe it was time to take a risk, to be the brave heroine she always admired in the books she taught. Maybe it was time to write her own love story instead of just reading about other people's. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, I'll go to the exhibition. I'll talk to him. I'll tell him everything." Min Young grinned. "That's my girl. Now come on, let's get out of here. You need to eat something and stop looking so pale. And we need to figure out what you're going to wear to this exhibition, because you are not showing up in your teacher clothes." As they left the school together, Ha-Rin felt something shift inside her chest. The locked room, the hollow space that had been there for 5 years, was starting to open. It was terrifying and exciting and overwhelming all at once. In 2 weeks, she would see Jin-Ho again. In 2 weeks, everything would change. Again. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur of anticipation and anxiety. Ha-Rin went through her daily routine, teaching classes and grading papers and pretending everything was normal. But inside, she was counting down the days, the hours, the minutes until the exhibition opening. She had nightmares about it going wrong, about Jin-Ho rejecting her, about discovering he was married or engaged or simply not interested anymore. But she also had daydreams where everything went perfectly, where they fell into each other's arms like no time had passed at all, where the 5 years of separation melted away and they picked up right where they had left off. Min-young helped her shop for a dress, something elegant but not too formal, something that said she had moved on and was successful, but also that she still cared, that she had never really stopped caring. They settled on a simple black dress with subtle details, paired with the necklace Jin-Ho had given her for her birthday years ago, a delicate silver chain she had never worn after he left. Wearing it now felt significant, like a message she was sending even before they spoke. She practiced what she would say, rehearsing speeches in front of her bathroom mirror. But everything sounded wrong, too dramatic or too casual, too angry or too desperate. Finally, she decided she would just speak from her heart, would say whatever came naturally in the moment. Jin-Ho had always valued honesty over eloquence anyway. The night before the exhibition, Ha-Rin couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Jin-Ho was also awake somewhere across the city, also nervous, also hoping and fearing in equal measure. She thought about the letter, which she had read so many times she practically had it memorized. She thought about all the things she wanted to tell him, all the emotions she had suppressed for 5 years. And she thought about the future, about the possibility that tomorrow night could be the beginning of something new, or the final closure of something that had been lingering half alive for too long. Friday evening arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze. Ha-Rin spent extra time on her appearance, doing her makeup more carefully than usual, styling her hair, putting on the dress and the necklace. Min-young came over to provide moral support and help with last-minute preparations. "You look beautiful," Min-young said, standing back to admire her friend. "He's going to take one look at you and remember exactly why he fell in love with you. Or he's going to take one look at me and panic," Ha-Rin said nervously. "What if this is a mistake? What if I'm about to make a complete fool of myself?" "Then you'll be a brave fool," Min-young said firmly, "which is better than a coward who never tried. Now come on, the taxi's here." The gallery in Gangnam was stunning, all white walls and high ceilings and professional lighting. When Ha-Rin arrived, there was already a crowd, well-dressed people sipping wine and examining the photographs hung throughout the space. She recognized some of the images from Jin-Ho's social media accounts she had occasionally checked over the years when her willpower failed. Landscapes from around the world, candid shots of people in various countries, architectural studies, nature photography. His work had matured significantly. She could see that immediately. There was a confidence and clarity to these images that his earlier work, while good, hadn't quite achieved. But she wasn't there to admire the art. She was there to find the artist. Ha-Rin moved through the crowd, her heart pounding, searching for Jin-Ho's familiar face. She saw him finally, standing near the back of the gallery, talking to an older man in an expensive suit, probably a buyer or a critic. Jin-Ho was wearing a dark suit himself, looking more formal than she had ever seen him. He had always preferred casual clothes, jeans, and comfortable shirts. But he wore the suit well, she had to admit. He looked successful, confident, like someone who had spent 5 years conquering the world. As if sensing her gaze, Jin-Ho looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and everything else seemed to fade away. She saw his expression change, saw shock and hope and fear all flash across his face in quick succession. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just looked at each other, separated by 15 feet and 5 years, and all the words they had never said. Then Jin-Ho excused himself from his conversation and started walking toward her. Ha-Rin's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment everything had been building toward. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, wanted to protect herself from the vulnerability of this moment. But she forced herself to stay still, to meet him halfway, to be brave. "Ha-Rin," he said when he reached her, and just hearing him say her name again after all this time made her eyes sting with tears. "You came. I got your letter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one from 5 years ago. It was on my desk at school 2 weeks ago. I don't know how it got there, but I got it." Jin-Ho's face went pale. "You read it?" I thought. "I never sent it. I couldn't. I've been carrying it around for 5 years like an idiot, too scared to actually deliver it. But then when I came back to Seoul, I thought maybe... I don't know what I thought. That somehow getting it to you would make everything right, or at least would let you know the truth before I left again." "Left again?" Ha-Rin felt panic rise in her chest. "You're leaving?" "The exhibition is for 3 weeks. Then I have projects lined up in Europe. That's the plan anyway." He looked at her intensely. "Unless you give me a reason to stay." The crowd around them continued to move and chat, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Someone laughed nearby. Music played softly from hidden speakers. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that Ha-Rin's entire world was balanced on the edge of this moment. "I loved you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "5 years ago when you left, I loved you so much it physically hurt. But I was too proud to say it, too afraid to ask you to stay because I thought if you chose to leave anyway, it would destroy me. So I pretended I didn't care, that letting you go was easy. But it wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've regretted it every single day since." Jin-Ho's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Ha-Rin, I'm not finished," she said, gaining momentum, letting 5 years of suppressed emotion finally break free. "I've spent 5 years half alive going through the motions, pretending I was okay when really I was just waiting for I don't know what. A sign, a second chance, something. And then your letter appeared, and I realized I was waiting for you. I've always been waiting for you. I never stopped loving you," Jin-Ho said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for a single day. I dated other people, tried to move on, tried to convince myself that what we had was just young love, just something I needed to outgrow. But no one was you. No one even came close. I photographed the entire world, saw incredible things, met amazing people. But every sunset made me think of you. Every beautiful place made me wish you were there to see it with me. I've been carrying that letter around like a talisman, like as long as I had it, there was still a chance." They were both crying now, neither of them caring who saw, neither of them caring about anything except each other. The 5 years of separation, the pride and fear and miscommunication that had kept them apart, all of it seemed suddenly trivial in the face of what they were finally saying to each other. "So what do we do now?" Ha-Rin asked. "How do we fix this?" Jin-Ho reached out and took her hands, his grip warm and solid and real. "We start over. We be honest this time. We don't let pride or fear make decisions for us. We take the risk of being vulnerable because that's what love requires. What about Europe, your projects? I'll cancel them, or postpone them, or only take projects in Seoul. I don't care about any of that anymore. I've spent 5 years chasing success and adventure, and it was all just a distraction from what I really wanted, which was you, which was always you." Ha-Rin felt like she was floating, like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. This was really happening. They were really getting a second chance. After 5 years of pain and longing and regret, they were being given the opportunity to rewrite their story. "I need to tell you something else," Jin-Ho said, his expression turning serious. "The letter finding its way to you wasn't entirely accidental. I mean, the method was complicated and involved bribing a security guard and possibly breaking a few laws. But it wasn't random. I came back to Seoul planning to find you, to tell you everything. But when I actually got here, when I was actually in the city where you were, I panicked. What if too much time had passed? What if you had moved on? So I thought, maybe if I gave you the letter, you could read it privately, decide what you wanted, contact me if you were interested. It was cowardly, I know. I should have just shown up at your door, or your school, or wherever you were. But I guess old habits die hard. I'm still the same guy who was too scared to send the letter 5 years ago. But you sent it this time," Ha-Rin said, squeezing his hands. "That's what matters. You took the risk. You gave me the chance to know the truth. And I'm here now. telling you that I feel the same way, that I've always felt the same way." They stood there in the middle of the gallery, holding hands, looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. And maybe in that moment they were. Maybe everything else, all the other people, and the art, and the city beyond the walls, all of it faded to background noise. Maybe that's what love was. Finding someone who made the rest of the world go quiet. "Can I kiss you?" Jin-Ho asked, his voice soft. "Yes," Ha-Rin said. "Please." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away, to retreat back into safety. But she didn't. She met him halfway, rising up on her toes, and when their lips finally touched, it felt like coming home. It felt like 5 years of winter ending all at once. It felt like the beginning of everything. They stayed at the exhibition for another hour, walking through the photographs together. Jin-Ho explaining the stories behind various images, Ha-Rin seeing the past 5 years of his life laid out in visual form. She could see the progression, the way his art had evolved. But she could also see the loneliness woven through it. So many empty landscapes, so many shots of solitary figures. It was beautiful, but melancholy. The work of someone who was running from something. "I can see it now," she said, standing in front of a particularly striking image of a sunset over a desert, a single figure silhouetted in the foreground. "You were looking for something in all these places, but you never found it because what you were looking for was back here." "I was looking for you," Jin-Ho agreed. "But I was also looking for myself, for the courage to come back, for the understanding of what really matters. I think I needed these 5 years, as painful as they were. I needed to see the world to understand that the world didn't matter as much as the person I loved." They left the gallery together as it was closing, walking out into the Seoul night. The city was alive with lights and sound, cars streaming past, people hurrying to and from their destinations. It was the same city Ha-Rin had been living in for years, the same streets she walked every day, but everything looked different now. Brighter, more vivid, more full of possibility. "Where do we go from here?" she asked as they stood on the sidewalk, still holding hands like teenagers afraid to let go. "I don't know," Jin-Ho admitted. "I guess we figure it out together. That's what we should have done 5 years ago." "We can't change the past," Ha-Rin said, "but maybe we can learn from it. Maybe we can be better this time." "I want to be better," Jin-Ho said earnestly. "I want to be brave enough to fight for you, to stay even when things get hard, to communicate instead of running. I want to build a life with you, Ha-Rin. Not someday, not eventually, but now. I've wasted 5 years. I don't want to waste another day." They walked through Gangnam together, talking about everything and nothing. 5 years of experiences to catch up on, but also comfortable silences, the easy companionship of people who knew each other deeply. They got coffee at a late-night cafe, sitting by the window and watching the city. They talked about their jobs, their families, their dreams. They talked about the past, examining it with new honesty, seeing all the places where they had made mistakes, where fear had guided their choices. And they talked about the future, tentatively sketching out what it might look like. Jin-Ho could base himself in Seoul, take local projects, only travel occasionally. Ha-Rin could continue teaching, maybe write more, maybe finally pursue the novel she had always talked about writing, but never started. As the night deepened and the cafe began to close, they walked Ha-Rin back to her apartment in Mapo. It was the same apartment she had lived in 5 years ago, the place where Jin-Ho had said goodbye, where they had made the mistake of letting each other go. But now, standing outside the building, everything was different. "Do you want to come up?" Ha-Rin asked. "We could talk more, or not talk, just be together." Jin-Ho smiled. "I would love that. But I think I should go back to my hotel tonight. Not because I don't want to stay, but because I want to do this right. I want to take our time, build something solid, not just rush into things because we're emotional and nostalgic." Ha-Rin nodded, respecting his reasoning, even as part of her wanted to protest, wanted to hold on to him and never let go again. "You're right, we have time, all the time in the world." "I'll call you tomorrow," Jin-Ho promised. "We'll have breakfast, or lunch, or dinner, or all three, whatever you want." "All three sounds good," Ha-Rin said, smiling. I've got 5 years of meals to make up for." They kissed goodbye, slow and sweet, a promise of more to come. And then Jin-Ho got into a taxi and disappeared into the Seoul night, leaving Ha-Rin standing on the sidewalk, her heart full for the first time in years. She went up to her apartment, to the window where she had stood so many nights looking out at the city, feeling alone. But tonight, the loneliness was gone. Tonight, she looked out at Seoul and saw possibility instead of emptiness. She saw a future instead of just an endless present. The letter that had started everything was in her bag. She pulled it out one more time, reading Jin-Ho's words from 5 years ago, marveling at the fact that they had made it here, that somehow, against all odds, they had found their way back to each other. Some stories, she thought, don't end when you think they do. Some stories just pause, waiting for the right moment to continue. Some goodbyes are really just intermissions, and some letters, even ones that arrive 5 years late, can change everything. She pulled out her notebook, the one where she had written her own letter to Jin-Ho, all the things she had wanted to say. Tomorrow, she decided she would give it to him. He had been brave enough to show her his heart. She could do the same. Ha-Rin looked out at the city one more time, at the lights reflecting off the wet streets, at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. And she smiled, really smiled, for the first time in 5 years. Because she knew something now that she hadn't known before. She knew that love was worth fighting for. She knew that vulnerability wasn't weakness but strength. She knew that some things, some people, were worth the risk of getting hurt. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through her windows, the kind of perfect autumn light that made everything look like a painting. Ha-Rin woke up early, not because her alarm had gone off, but because she was too excited to sleep. For the first time in 5 years, she woke up with hope instead of the usual dull ache of loneliness. She made coffee, humming to herself, and pulled out the notebook with her letter to Jin-Ho. Reading it over, she added a few more lines, trying to capture the overwhelming gratitude she felt that they had been given this second chance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jin-Ho. "Good morning. Are you awake? I know I said I'd call, but I couldn't wait. Can I see you now? I'm in a cafe near your place." Ha-Rin laughed at his impatience, feeling her own matching urgency. She texted back immediately. "Give me 20 minutes. I need to look like a functioning human." She got ready quickly, putting on comfortable clothes, her hair still damp from a quick shower. She grabbed the notebook with her letter, tucking it carefully into her bag. This was it. They were really doing this, really trying again, really choosing each other over fear. The cafe Jin-Ho had mentioned was a small place she passed every day on her way to the subway, but had never actually gone into. It was the kind of neighborhood spot that looked unremarkable from the outside, but was probably someone's favorite place in the world. When she walked in, she saw Jin-Ho immediately, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee already on the table, his camera resting beside him. He looked up as the bell over the door chimed, and his face transformed with a smile that made her heart skip. "You're beautiful," he said as she approached, standing up to pull out her chair. "I don't think I told you that enough when we were together before. But you are. You always have been." Ha-Rin felt herself blush, unused to such direct compliments. The old Jin-Ho had been more reserved with his affections, showing his love through actions rather than words. This version seemed determined to say everything he had kept inside for 5 years. "You're not so bad yourself," she said, settling into the chair. "Though you look tired. Didn't you sleep?" "Not much," Jin-Ho admitted. "I kept thinking about everything. About us. About how different things could have been if I had just been honest 5 years ago. About how much time we wasted." "We can't think like that," Ha-Rin said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "If we spend all our time regretting the past, we'll miss the present. And the present is pretty good, don't you think?" Jin-Ho squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "It's better than good. It's everything I've wanted for 5 years." He paused, seeming nervous. "I have something to tell you, though. Something I should probably have mentioned last night, but I was so overwhelmed by seeing you that I forgot." Ha-Rin felt a flutter of anxiety. "What is it?" "The exhibition," Jin-Ho said. "It's not just a regular show, it's actually a retrospective of my 5 years of travel. And there's a section at the end that I haven't shown anyone yet. The gallery wanted to include it as a surprise for the critics and buyers. It's all photographs of you, or places that reminded me of you. Things I shot over the years when I was missing you. I called it the distance between us. I wasn't sure if you'd ever see it, but I needed to create it anyway. I needed to acknowledge what I had lost. Ha-Rin felt tears prick her eyes. You made art about missing me? I made art about loving you, Jin-Ho corrected gently. About the fact that no matter how far I traveled, you were always there. In every sunset that reminded me of the evenings we spent on your rooftop. In every bookstore that made me think of how you could spend hours browsing without buying anything. In every cup of coffee I drank alone wishing you were there to share it with. You were my ghost, Ha-Rin, the beautiful ghost that haunted every moment of the past 5 years. She was crying now, unable to stop the tears. I want to see it. The section about me. I want to see how you saw me, how you remembered me. The gallery opens at 10, Jin-Ho said, checking his watch. We have an hour, but there's something I need to know first. Last night you said you loved me past tense. Do you still? I mean, I know it's only been one night, and maybe it's too soon to ask, but I need to know if what we're building here is real or if it's just nostalgia, just the comfort of something familiar. Ha-Rin took a deep breath, gathering her courage. This was the moment for honesty, for vulnerability, for all the things they had failed at before. I never stopped loving you, Jin-Ho. Even when I tried to, even when I dated other people and told myself I was moving on, you were always there in the back of my mind, in the corner of my heart. I measured every man against you and they all fell short. I compared every moment of happiness to the happiness I felt with you, and it was never quite the same. So yes, I still love you. I love you right now, in this moment, in this cafe, with terrible coffee and morning light and 5 years of grief and hope all tangled up together. I love you. Jin-Ho stood up abruptly, came around the table, and pulled her into his arms. They stood there in the middle of the cafe, holding each other, crying and laughing simultaneously, while other customers tactfully pretended not to notice. It was messy and public and perfect. I'm not letting you go again, Jin-Ho said into her hair. I don't care what happens, what obstacles come up, what fears try to make me run. I'm choosing you, every day, for the rest of my life. If you'll have me. I'll have you, Ha-Rin said, pulling back to look at his face. I'll choose you too. We'll choose each other. That's how this works, right? We keep choosing each other, even when it's hard. They walked to the gallery together, holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. Jin-Ho told her about his travels, about the places he had been and the people he had met. He told her about the times he had almost come home, had almost bought a plane ticket back to Seoul just to see if she was okay. He told her about the relationships he had tried to have, brief connections that never developed into anything meaningful because he was still in love with someone else. Ha-Rin told him about her years too, about the routine she had built to keep herself busy, about the students she had taught and the small joys she had found in her work. She told him about the letters she wrote but never sent. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all addressed to him in her mind. She told him about the nights she couldn't sleep, lying awake wondering where he was, if he was safe, if he ever thought about her. We're both idiots, Jin-Ho said affectionately. We spent 5 years pining for each other when we could have just been honest and together. We're human, Ha-Rin corrected. We made mistakes, but we're fixing them now. The gallery was quiet when they arrived, not yet open to the public. The director recognized Jin-Ho and let them in, clearly curious about Ha-Rin's identity, but too polite to ask directly. Jin-Ho led her through the familiar exhibition space, past the photographs she had seen last night, to a smaller room at the back that had been closed during the opening. This is it, he said, his voice nervous. I haven't shown this to anyone yet. You're the first. I'm terrified, actually. What if you hate it? What if it's too much, too obsessive? Jin-Ho, Ha-Rin said gently. Just show me. He opened the door. The room was smaller than the main gallery, more intimate, with soft lighting that made it feel like entering a sanctuary. And on every wall were photographs of Ha-Rin, or rather, photographs that were about Ha-Rin. There were some actual pictures of her from before he left, candid shots he had taken during their relationship. Ha-Rin reading by a window, the light catching in her hair. Ha-Rin laughing at something, her whole face alive with joy. Ha-Rin sleeping, peaceful and unguarded. But most of the photographs were more abstract. An empty chair at a cafe in Paris. A bookstore in Barcelona with a woman's silhouette that could have been Ha-Rin from behind. A single cup of coffee on a table in Tokyo, steam rising in the morning light. A window in Prague that looked exactly like the window in Ha-Rin's apartment, with the same view of rooftops and sky. "I couldn't stop seeing you," Jin-Ho explained, his voice quiet as Ha-Rin moved from image to image, taking it all in. "Everywhere I went, there you were. Or there was the empty space where you should have been. I started photographing that absence, that longing. It became an obsession, honestly. My way of keeping you with me even though you weren't really there." Ha-Rin stopped in front of a particularly striking image. It was a sunset over a desert, golden light spilling across sand dunes. And in the foreground, barely visible, was Jin-Ho's own shadow. "This one," she said. "Tell me about this one." "Morocco," Jin-Ho said, coming to stand beside her. "I was on assignment, shooting landscapes for a travel magazine. I had been gone for about a year at that point. It was sunset, the light was perfect, and I was standing there thinking about how you would have loved this view. You always loved sunsets. I could imagine you standing next to me, pointing out the different shades of orange and pink, probably quoting some poet I'd never heard of. And I realized I was more interested in the empty space beside me than in the beautiful view in front of me. So I turned the camera around and shot my own shadow, alone in the desert. It's not technically a great photograph. The composition is off, the focus isn't quite right, but it's honest. It's how I felt for 5 years. Like a shadow of myself, incomplete without you." Ha-Rin turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face again. "You really never stopped loving me." "How could I?" Jin-Ho said simply. "You're the love of my life, Ha-Rin. I knew it when we were together, and I know it now. I just wish I had been brave enough to say it back then." They spent another hour in that small room, Jin-Ho explaining each photograph, Ha-Rin asking questions and crying and occasionally laughing at his stories. It was like experiencing his 5 years of absence in compressed form, seeing all the loneliness and beauty and longing laid out visually. By the time they emerged back into the main gallery, Ha-Rin felt like she understood something profound. They had both been living parallel lives of grief, both carrying the same weight of loss, both believing they were alone in their pain. But they never had been. They had been missing each other simultaneously, loving each other from afar, waiting without knowing they were both waiting. "I have something for you too," Ha-Rin said as they left the gallery, walking out into the late morning sunshine. "Not as elaborate as an entire room of photographs, but it's my heart on paper." She pulled out the notebook, slightly nervous now. "I've been writing letters to you for 5 years, letters I never sent, and after I read your letter, I wrote you one more. I want you to have it. I want you to know that you weren't alone. I was missing you too. I was loving you too. I was waiting too." Jin-Ho took the notebook reverently, like it was something precious and fragile. "Can I read it now?" "Yes, but maybe somewhere private? I don't think I can handle watching you read it in public. I might die of embarrassment or anxiety or both." They went back to Jin-Ho's hotel, a luxury place in Gangnam with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Ha-Rin sat on the couch while Jin-Ho read, watching his face change as he absorbed her words. She had poured everything into that letter, 5 years of emotion distilled into pages of confessions and apologies and love. She had written about the mistakes she made in letting him go, about the pride that had kept her from admitting she needed him, about the countless times she had almost reached out but stopped herself. She had written about the emptiness his absence had created, the way the world had seemed less colorful, less interesting, less alive without him in it. And she had written about hope, about the fragile, terrifying hope that maybe they could try again, maybe they could build something stronger this time, maybe they could learn from their mistakes and create something beautiful from the wreckage of their first attempt. When Jin-Ho finished reading, he set the notebook down carefully and looked at her with eyes full of emotion. "We're both such fools," he said, but he was smiling. "We wasted so much time being scared when we should have just been honest." "We're being honest now," Ha-Rin pointed out. Better late than never, right? Jin-Ho pulled her into his arms, and they sat there on the couch, wrapped around each other, finally truly together after 5 years of separation. I'm canceling my Europe projects, Jin-Ho said decisively. I'm staying in Seoul. I'm staying with you. I don't care about the career implications or the money or any of it. None of that matters if I'm alone. Don't cancel everything, Ha-Rin said, pulling back to look at him. Keep some projects, travel when you need to, but come home to me. That's all I ask. Don't give up your dreams for me, just make sure I'm part of them this time. You want me to travel? Jin-Ho looked surprised. I want you to be happy, Ha-Rin clarified. And photography makes you happy. Seeing the world makes you happy. I don't want to be the thing that clips your wings. I just want to be the place you come home to. And maybe sometimes if you want company, I could come with you. I've never really traveled. I've spent my whole life in Seoul, in my safe little routine. Maybe it's time I saw some of the world too. Jin-Ho's face lit up. You would travel with me, even though you hate flying? I don't hate flying. I'm just nervous about it. But I'd be nervous anywhere without you at this point. At least in a plane, you'd be right there. She smiled. Besides, I teach literature. I've read about all these places but never seen them. It might be nice to actually visit some of the settings I teach about. We could start small, Jin-Ho said excitedly, his mind already planning. A weekend in Jeju to see if you like traveling. Then maybe Japan since it's close. Then if you're enjoying it, we could go farther. I have a project in Italy next spring. Imagine teaching Italian literature after you've actually been to Venice and Florence and Rome. Ha-Rin laughed at his enthusiasm. Okay. Let's not plan the entire future right now. Let's just focus on today, on this moment, on the fact that we're here together and we get to start over. Start over, Jin-Ho repeated, liking the sound of it. Clean slate, new beginning. Not completely clean, Ha-Rin said. We still have all our memories, good and bad. We still have 5 years of growth and change that happened separately. We're not the same people we were, and that's okay. Maybe we're better people now. Maybe we needed those 5 years to figure out who we were individually before we could be together. Jin-Ho thought about that, about the person he had been 5 years ago. Young, ambitious, but also insecure and afraid of commitment. He had run to Europe not just for the job opportunity, but because part of him had been terrified of the depth of his feelings for Ha-Rin, of what it would mean to choose love over adventure. He had spent 5 years learning that adventure without love was hollow, that success without someone to share it with was meaningless. He had grown up, learned what really mattered. And now he was ready. Ready to be the partner Ha-Rin deserved. Ready to do the hard work of maintaining a relationship. Ready to choose her every single day. I'm not going to mess this up again, he said seriously. I'm not going to let fear make my decisions. I'm not going to run when things get difficult. I'm going to stay and fight and communicate and be vulnerable even when it's uncomfortable. Because losing you once was enough. I never want to feel that way again. We'll both mess up sometimes, Ha-Rin said realistically. We're human. We'll have arguments and misunderstandings and moments of doubt, but we'll work through them. That's the difference this time. We won't give up just because things get hard. They spent the rest of the day together, talking and planning and simply being in each other's presence. They had lunch at a restaurant in Itaewon, walked through Namsan Park hand in hand, took silly photos together that Jin-Ho promised to print and frame. They acted like teenagers on a first date, giddy and nervous and completely absorbed in each other. But they also had the wisdom of adults who had experienced loss, who understood that love was precious and fragile and required effort to maintain. As evening approached and the sky turned the colors of sunset, Jin-Ho led Ha-Rin to one more place. The rooftop of his hotel, which had a small garden area that guests could access. Seoul spread out below them in every direction, millions of lights beginning to sparkle as darkness fell. The mountains were silhouettes against the purple sky, and the Han River gleamed like a dark ribbon. This reminds me of your rooftop, Jin-Ho said, where we used to watch sunsets together. I've missed that. I've missed you. I'm here now, Ha-Rin said, leaning against him, and I'm not going anywhere. They stood there as full darkness fell, as the city transformed into a constellation of lights, as the air grew cool enough that Jin-Ho wrapped his jacket around Ha-Rin's shoulders. And in that moment, standing together overlooking the city that had been the setting of both their happiness and their heartbreak, they made a silent promise. To be brave, to be honest, to choose each other, to build something lasting from the ruins of what they had lost. Some stories, Ha-Rin thought, don't end when you think they do. They just pause, waiting for the characters to grow enough to handle the next chapter. She and Jin-Ho had needed 5 years apart to understand what they had together. They had needed distance to appreciate closeness, loss to value love, separation to choose reunion. It had been painful, yes. It had been the hardest 5 years of her life. But maybe it had also been necessary. Maybe they were finally ready for each other now in a way they hadn't been before. The letter that Jin-Ho had written 5 years ago but never sent had finally reached her. Not through the mail, not through conventional means, but through persistence and fate and the refusal to give up on something beautiful. It had arrived late, but at exactly the right time. And it had changed everything, just as written words so often did. Because Ha-Rin was a literature teacher, and she knew the power of language, the way the right words at the right moment could transform a life. Jin-Ho's letter had been those right words. It had broken through 5 years of walls and pride and fear. It had given them permission to try again. And now here they were, together on a rooftop in Seoul, writing a new ending to their story. Or perhaps not an ending at all. Perhaps just a new beginning, the start of something that would last this time, that would weather storms and distance and all the challenges that life inevitably brought. Because they were choosing it. They were choosing each other. And that choice, made with intention and courage and love, would make all the difference. "I love you," Jin-Ho said into the darkness, his voice clear and sure. "I love you, Yoon Ha-Rin. I'm saying it out loud so there's no doubt, no confusion, no room for misunderstanding. I love you, and I'm going to keep loving you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Ha-Rin replied, her voice equally certain. "I love you, Jin-Ho. I'm choosing you. Today and tomorrow and every day after that. For as long as you'll have me." "Forever then," Jin-Ho said, pulling her closer. "I'll have you forever." And in that moment, with the city lights spread out below them like a promise, with the future uncertain but hopeful, with 5 years of pain finally transformed into wisdom, they both understood something fundamental. That love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It was about showing up, being honest, staying when things got hard. It was about choosing someone over and over again, not just in the easy moments, but in the difficult ones too. It was about writing letters even when you're afraid to send them. It was about coming back even when you're afraid of rejection. It was about taking risks, being vulnerable, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the person you love loves you back just as much. And they did. They loved each other just as much. They always had. They just needed 5 years and one letter to finally admit it.